Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting of December 12th, 2011. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Cozen.
Present.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Delavar.
Present.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember Morris.
Here.
And Councilmember Russell.
We did receive a message from John that he would not be at the meeting this evening. Are there any members of the public that would wish to address council this evening? Okay, going into agenda bill reports. Community development, authorization to sign a professional services agreement. Mitch.
Thank you. The agenda bill before you this evening is, again, a professional service agreement with Wallace Engineering. This is for a continuation of a professional service agreement that we have with them. It's been modified slightly, though. However, the agreement itself is for development review, community development review. It's been modified since the hiring of a city engineer. Those duties, basically, in the scope, have been pulled out of this professional service agreement. So you'll see that we don't have construction and inspection as part of which is basically the biggest difference. What that also does is lower the bottom line to the expenditure amount is considerably less than it was last year. And so the recommended action for City Council is to authorize the mayor to sign the professional service agreement with Wallace Engineering on behalf of the City of Washougal.
Council questions, Michael?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm really glad that we've got the city engineer on board, and I'm happy for that. But if there's a case where the city engineer is overwhelmed or can't quite fulfill all of his duties, I mean, the things that Wallace could have filled in for, would that mean that if we wanted Wallace to fill in for whatever the city engineer couldn't do, we'd have to have a separate PSA or an amendment?
If it was development related, then it's possibly, then that could be the case. But we actually built in from a cost standpoint. We, obviously we want to have a year like we had this year, and so, but still, even with the 15,000, we believe that can accommodate that growth and anything that we're, could be thrown at us there.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other council questions? Okay, moving over to Public Works. Okay, we can go to Human Resources first. Try to go right by that one. Resolution for compensation of department heads and non-represented employees.
Right. Thank you, Mayor, Council. So this is a combination agenda bill that will be before you next Monday night. The first section has to do with 2A of our personnel policies, and what this provides for is a 1% adjustment to the salary ranges, as well as additional cost sharing for the medical insurance. Both these proposals are similar to what we have in the current police contract. And again, what we've discussed is getting uniformity in terms of across the board with city personnel in terms of the increases in the medical insurance. The second item is also within the personnel policies, 19.02. What this does is it tightens up our tuition reimbursement policy, providing more structure in terms of process and procedure, criteria, and such. Both these items on the agenda bill are captured in our 2012 adopted budget. So the recommended action will be to read the resolution by title only, pass and post the resolution in the usual manner.
Questions from council? Rod?
Jeanette, I have a question on, in the computer here, it's page 15, but that doesn't help you. 2.A.01 is an introduction, and it has the list of non-represented employees. At the bottom it says fire marshal. Is that a position that is a non-represented, even though right
Yes.
now it's a position being filled by a union representative?
Actually, the bona fide position, you're talking about Larry Osentowski
Yeah.
and the work. So Larry's been on light duty, correct me if I'm wrong, Ron.
Right, that was just,
But-
you're just performing the duties. of
Correct.
deputy fire marshal.
But the bona fide position is a non-represented position,
Okay.
yeah,
Just curious, saw that on there now.
yeah.
Any other questions from council? Okay. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Now on to Mr. Dunn. Jim, you've got a number of housekeeping items for us.
Yes. And I'll move through these briefly. The first one up for Public Works is our Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant. There's no scope change or budget change to this one, and this is just a time extension. Second agenda item is Professional Services Agreement with Wallace Engineering, and this is a general engineering services as well, similar to Mitch's situation, bringing on the city engineer. We save substantially on this general engineering PSA with Wallace. Number three, it's a supplemental professional service agreement with PB Americas, and this is conceptual design of SR 14 and 27th Street extension. And this is another time extension only, no scope or budget changes. Number four, another supplemental professional service agreement with Wallace Engineering. This is Zone 4 reservoir improvements, and this is time extension only, again, no budget changes at all. Number five, another SPSA with Parsons Brinkerhoff. This has to do with our Transportation Capital Facility Plan. This is another time extension, and there are no scope or expense changes. Number six is a supplemental professional service agreement with S&S Janitorial, and this is no scope change. There will be a slight increase with this janitorial service agreement. This is one that we roll over each year. Number seven is a SPSA, number 9 with Wallace Engineering. Has to do with E Street improvements and is a time extension only as well. Any questions on any of the items from Public Works?
Jennifer?
Yes, on number 4, and this isn't really a question, it's just a comment. There's a mistake. Let me go back and see if I can find it. What was number 4 again?
It's the SPSA for Zone 4 reservoir improvements.
Yes. Here it is. Okay, second page, it just says personal services agreement.
Okay,
This is professional service agreement.
got it.
So, and then there's another, it does it again, on number 8, I believe it is. Is that the one with SMS?
Which one was that?
Next one. Sorry, I'll get there. Wallace Engineering for the East Street Improvement Project. Yeah, it says it again, personal services contract instead of professional service agreement.
Okay,
So, you see it?
thank you, yes.
Supplemental agreement number 9.
Yep, I got it, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Jim? Dave?
Jim, on number 6 there, and when we talked about this afternoon, this is the one on the janitorial service.
Yes,
You were kind enough to tell me that the contract was competitively bid in 2010.
That's
What I
correct.
forgot to ask was, and didn't think to ask was, when are we going to competitively bid this contract again?
we can do that next year if need be, and I would think if the cost associated with that goes up again, that we'd probably do a competitive bid process. So-
Is there any set guidance for when we do it, or is it a judgment call?
It's, we can renew, I believe it's 3 years, I'll have to get back to you on that, but we can renew each year, 3 years if they're doing a good job,
Okay.
if they're meeting the requirements, so,
And I understand this fellow is.
yes.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Jim, along with Councilman Shoemaker's question, in here in the last sentence, it says, in the opinion of the staff, and the work provided by S&S Janitorial was satisfactory and recommends extending the contract. Is that generally, I mean, without going back out for a RFP, or we can do that through staff, and just as long as their services were okay?
Yeah, that is correct.
Because I'm like you, I thought, well, when are we gonna put that up for bid again? But on the other hand, if it does allow it for them to be extended, if the services are done right.
And if I could just add to that, there is substantial time, going through the RFP process, and a lot of staff time that goes into that and the advertising. And S&S Janitorial is doing a good job. They do have an increase this year, but, it's to cover their expenses. And I talked to Steve the other day, and really it's to cover his operating costs. So they are a local service, and they provide jobs for local people. So in my opinion, it's warranted.
Jennifer?
Yes, thank you. Speaking locally to the service, I think it's great that we're using a local service. However, I noticed in the letter that he sent November 17th, he was talking about the COLA adjustment at 2.6%, that he's increasing, and then he's referencing a 2011 Portland July CPI-U, which I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's the Consumer Price Index, and it's based on the Portland Consumer Price Index, which is fairly typical here in southern Washington.
Okay, so we recognize that.
It's almost exclusively what we use.
It's the U.S. Department of Commerce Bureau of Labor Statistics produces a consumer price index twice a year for metros the size of Portland. They produce one monthly on a national basis and in some larger jurisdictions, but only twice a year for the Portland metro. And that is the standard for consumer price index. When you read a number in the newspaper, that's where it comes from.
Okay, so do any other organizations that we negotiate with use that? Negotiations? Yeah.
We use it for labor negotiations
Labor
itself.
That's what I was gonna say, I thought it was labor negotiations as well, so, yeah.
In this, council, in this case, I think we just have a vendor who has shared with us what motivated his pricing. I believe most vendors don't tell us necessarily what motivated the hourly rate or the pricing that they provide. In this case, he shared with us that he looked at that and introduced that into his price. Usually
Right.
we don't get that information. They give us the price, and then we decide whether that's an appropriate price for us.
Right, no, and I totally agree there. It's just quite a bit higher than what we're negotiating with our own staff, so.
Yes, that's the most recent CPI-U, the urban. You're right about that.
The CPI-U is the most commonly used statistic for a cost of living adjustment for a COLA. There are a small, I would guess less than 5% number of contracts that use the PPI, the Producer Price Index. But those are typically contracts that don't use labor as much as they use commodities.
I asked for a clarification too, I agree with you, but at the same time, this is a negotiated item. I mean, it's information for us, but it's different than we're using for the bargaining and the contracts. That's a negotiated item, so we have the right to say yes or no, and we have the right to say yes or no on this one as well, but, so that's where they're getting that information from.
And this has been budgeted for
Mhm.
next year already.
Yes.
For
Use this
the-
information.
Yeah. For the janitorial? Yeah, if you remember the janitorial, we went out for a substantial rebid
Yes.
on that in 2010. And
It's about a $10,000 difference.
I thought it was more than that. I thought it was
It's right about
50%
about $10,000 difference.
from doing it in-house. Any other questions for Jim? Jim, before you get off the hot seat there, I know most of these are just time extensions because of the end of the year coming up and the timing put in on the PSAs. On the energy efficiency block grant, obviously, we've got some new lighting systems that have been installed. So we're moving along there. Have we completed all of our installations in the city yet?
Not quite yet. We still have some more street lights to install, and then a few more of the interior building lights.
Okay.
And this contract extension really is, Camus is still needs to do substantial work as far as their interior building lights. So
Right.
this extension will help them out in the long run.
Okay.
Are these lights from that?
That's correct.
Yeah, they changed these out
Here this week.
middle of last week?
Yeah. Oh yeah, last week. Excuse me.
And they
Yeah.
were at the fire department.
It's only
I think,
Monday.
What, Saturday or something like that, changing them out as well, so.
And then a question in regards to Wallace on E Street. Looks like we've got continuous sidewalks, we've got asphalt, ramping, all that kind of good stuff all in place?
Yeah, the south side sidewalks moving right along. They cut some curb out today just to drain East Street into some of the stormwater swales as well. And they'll be cleaning up. Punch list, I think, will be next week sometime, and we should be good to go. Looks good.
Are we gonna see as many dig outs as we did on the rest of it? That was terrible.
No.
The ones on E Street, they must have dug up 50 or 60 spots along there at times.
And we still have to do a walkthrough because it did freeze, and they didn't cover it with the blankets like I wanted it done, so they covered it with plastic. So we'll have to really go through it and make sure that there are no panels that we need to remove. But I think, yeah, it shouldn't be as extensive as E Street. That had to do with ADA sloping, so.
Looked like that
very
was the first
critical.
time they'd ever done sidewalks, as many as they tore up.
Yeah.
It wouldn't take there
Twice.
to be that many.
Twice.
Yeah,
Jeez.
At least we didn't get the bill for that.
yeah, it's on them.
Any other questions for Jim? Thank you, Jim. Okay, David, you got some administrative items. PSA with CREDC?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Council, next week you'll be asked to approve a PSA with the CREDC, the Columbia River Economic Development Council. This is a renewal of our agreement with them from last year. It's a $5,000 item. Two things that will get updated between this week and next week. You'll note in the agreement that you have that there's a monthly reporting requirement. And actually, they report on a bi-monthly basis to their board. And so that we're going to adjust the agreement. I believe all the other agreements with the municipalities will be adjusted so that we receive those reports. And I emailed this afternoon the latest reports that had gone to the CREDC board, and they'll just be for our information. And then the other change is that both ourselves and Camus are looking to introduce some language, just very simply to say that they will coordinate and collaborate with our Camas Washougal Economic Development Association. It could almost go without saying, because that is what is happening, but we thought it would be appropriate to just have that noted in this PSA. And so those two items will be updated in what you have in front of you next week. The recommended action would be for the mayor, authorizing the mayor to sign that. The next item is, you don't have in your packet, and I don't have any update for you specifically this week. This is the proposed interlocal agreement between ourselves and the city of Camas for our joint representation on the CTRAN and RTC boards of directors. Camas, as you know, we workshopped this item 2 weeks ago, and then we were awaiting input and feedback from the city of Camas. They held their workshop last week, and the council chartered the mayor and Lloyd and a council member to make some adjustments and revisions to propose to us that would address some concerns that they discussed at their workshop. We have yet to get those. We anticipate getting those by the middle of this week. And what we would do then is provide a revised interlocal agreement for your consideration as part of your packet for next week. And we will put a memo out by email to you that will explain what it is that the concerns were and how they've addressed it with their proposed revisions. So hopefully that'll be Wednesday or Thursday-ish of next week. And then I would anticipate that during your regular meeting that we could review the document in much like a workshop setting for a few minutes prior to your formal consideration. So it's kind of it's a work in progress, I guess I would say. And then the other two items, I'm going to turn both of those over to Jennifer, who has been helping me. Or do you want me to do them? Okay, I'll do them.
I have handouts.
She has the handouts. Okay.
The heavy
If you
work,
give me
huh?
one, that would help. And then I'll
Oh, I gave you two. Thanks.
So what we have here is just a summary of the high points of two agreements that we're working on with the West Columbia Gorge Humane Society and the Southwest Washington Humane Society. We were working on these last week. Chief Mitchell is taking point from the staff, and as you can imagine, we got a little distracted last week and were not able to give the focused attention that we need. We were only able to meet with Southwest for tying up the loose ends on this just this afternoon. So we will have something complete in time for your packets next week. But really, there's not significant change other than what we had talked about during the budget presentations with the documents that you will see next week. And this highlights for you. We picked 5 of the key contexts in these agreements, and I'm just comparing for you that West Columbia Gorge is our primary service provider and will continue to be our primary service provider, and Southwest Washington will only be a provider as a secondary or as a backup, particularly in the case of dogs if there isn't room at our local shelter. The types of animals that our own animal control officers deal with at West Columbia are dogs, but at Southwest Washington, for animals other than dogs, if we have issues like a snake or a goat, or we have a few odds and ends from time to time. Southwest is our primary service provider for those types of situations. Our citizens can bring dogs to these facilities, and then we are charged for that. The rate really is the significant change. Currently, at Southwest, we're charged a flat rate of $70, and as you recall and probably read in the press, and they've upped that to $120. That's for all of the communities in the county, and that is going to continue to ramp up on a schedule that they've already identified until it reaches $170 after several years. So as you'll recall in our budget discussions, we essentially offered that same package to West Columbia in terms of the flat rate. So that flat rate is what will now be in our agreement with West Columbia. And this replaces a lower per day charge and then a payment of $12,500. This will be the only payment that West Columbia Gorge will receive is this boarding fee. And they are comfortable with that. And in fact, it might actually be a little bit more depending upon how many dogs we see based upon our last profile. There's one other comparison just of note. The facilities and utilities and maintenance of those facilities, we provide that for West Columbia Gorge, as you know, out of the shelter. We take care of the utilities and the maintenance there. That's different from the Southwest scenario where all of that, the facilities and the utilities and the maintenance is included in that $120. There may be a little difference in service hours as well. We're still working with West Columbia, doing everything we can to try to enhance their availability for access for our citizens. Southwest has, right now, at least a little bit more availability in terms of hours on the weekend. But they can do what they can do, so we'll do everything we can to enhance that as much as we can. So that's what we'll see next week for those.
Brad?
Dave, what did we spend roughly last year for maintenance and upkeep of that building?
Is Jim still here? I don't have that
Okay,
number
I
off the top
I
of
just
my
wondered
head.
if it was a substantial amount or if it's
Seems like
something
we have a
that's-
$5,000 figure that's budgeted.
Jen can probably find that in a few moments, and we can report to you in a little bit.
Just curious, I just wondered how much we spent that way, and
Yeah, it's not a huge amount, but certainly it's a cost.
do they report how many animals they take in?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, that's
All
how,
of that's
that's how
all
we
done?
know, that's how they invoice us. Tracking it by numbers of days, in fact, because it's a per-day charge with a cap of 70. Now, it'll be easier if a dog comes in, there's a $120 charge. And we don't, the number of days is not as critical until the holding period is over, and then the dog becomes under their ownership. So really what we're doing here is making the two agreements and the scenarios as close together as we possibly can, just with this unique nuance of us subsidizing the facility, if you would.
Are they reporting that we get, not only does the West Columbia Gorge do a report that we get the invoice off of, as Dave said, but the animal control officers keep their reports as well and reconcile the two. So we not only have them by dog, but we've got them by which city, we've got all of those different pieces.
Right. We are working, there are some things that we would like to tighten up with West Columbia Gorge around sort of that bookkeeping, if you would. And they've been very open to working with us on that, and we're very appreciative of the efforts that they're going to take to try to tighten up some of that.
Great.
We have $4,000 budgeted for utility services, and through today, we've expended $3,960. And for repairs and maintenance of the building, we also budgeted $4,000, and we have spent through today $3,450.
8,000.
Any other questions for Dave on any of the 4 items he has?
Just,
Molly?
I just want to make sure that we've been coordinating with the city of Camas, since our animal patrol officers do deliver animals to both facilities, that this increase, that they understand that there's going to be this increase with
They are
West
aware.
Columbia Gorge.
They
as
are
well.
aware, and we are working with them. We estimated maybe $5,000 of an increase to them, and I think just as all of the communities in the county were somewhat disappointed to learn of the increase, we also understand what it takes to run one of these places, and kind of is what it is. So they are aware.
And I do have one more question. So let's say you have a dog owner in Washougal and he just decides he doesn't feel like taking care of an animal anymore, and he dumps it at the West Columbia Gorge or Southwest Washington. Who picks up the tab for that animal?
We do.
In both cases, we do. And after the holding period, it becomes the possession of the Humane Society itself.
No.
Nope. Chief?
Well, basically, if the owner surrendered the dog to Southwest, they would attempt to collect the fee from them. So if they just can't afford to take care of the dog, then they would attempt to charge. They do. Do they? Okay.
But they will waive it if the person can
So, same.
surrender.
Do we have any data that shows how many dogs are actually returned to owners? You know, what percentage and what I know there are a few that are euthanized, because we do see that coming through, and
Yes.
and many that are adopted. I know that there are many that are adopted, so.
We do.
Certainly
we
we
track
have
that.
data. Okay.
We have data. We know exactly how many days the dog was in the shelter prior to it being retrieved. They share with us the data to the point that the dog becomes theirs. After that, that data isn't as relevant in terms of the invoicing in our professional services
okay.
agreement,
Yeah,
but I'm
that would
sure
make
that they
sense.
have that information as well.
Rod?
Because of the surrender fee, and I guess I'll ask all 4 of you, because Nettie was actually there, but with the surrender fee, Then if somebody comes in and adopts that dog, do they get charged another fee for taking the dog out?
To adopt it?
Surrender fee is one thing, adoption fee is another.
Okay.
So you're just giving a little bit of money to help with the care of the dog, especially if they haven't had their vaccinations or something like that. I think when it's adopted out, the person adopting is paying that, so they're two different things.
I saw it coming in, I thought, I didn't remember hearing it, it was getting it from both directions when they surrendered one and,
West Columbia Board will waive the fee if they feel the person cannot afford it.
Other questions for David? Okay. Jennifer, you've got a couple of items for us. Starting out with some fireworks.
So included in your packet tonight is a contract with Western Display Fireworks. And essentially why you're seeing it now versus closer to the 4th of July is there's been some labor issues in China to where the cost of the fireworks, should we choose to purchase them next year, are going to go up. And the company actually contacted us and said, we have all these items currently in stock, so we will have them for you if you would like to secure them for next year right now by the end of the year. So essentially we're getting the same show for the same price for next year, $15,000. The Hotel Motel Lodging Tax Advisory Committee did approve this expenditure for next year, and it does come out of the restricted Hotel Motel Tax Fund. So the recommended action is to authorize the mayor to sign the contract to lock in that low rate for next year.
Questions? Okay, debt discussion.
All right. Sorry, I'm playing with my iPad. Just 1 second. I have a handout. So what we have for you tonight, can you hand them out? I might need one. Yeah. I have the other one. Thank you. Get situated. So this is continuing the discussion regarding the remaining unrestricted reserves from the general fund. And as promised, we brought back information on retiring the 2000 Bank of America outstanding bond issuance that we have remaining in the general, or in the water sewer fund. So what Dave is handing out are kind of the pros and cons as we see them, and then the list of all the outstanding debt. I'll wait till everybody has them.
Issue the tissue here.
Yeah.
So in looking through the possible payoff of the debt, it does retire the debt, approximately $390,000. It'll eliminate the annual payment requirement for the next 4 years, which is roughly $99,000 a year. Sorry. Which in turn reduces the overall utility enterprise debt load by 1.5%, and it'll save roughly $6,000 over the next 4 years. Since 10 years of the issuance is already passed, I think they're kind of like mortgage loans where the interest is upfront, the bulk of it. So as you get to the end of it, it's more principal-based and not interest-based. So it's really not significant savings. It is $6,000, but it's not a large amount. The con would be it reduces our unrestricted general fund resources available for community needs, and then it raises the policy question of using general fund reserves to benefit the utility enterprise fund. So that's part of the discussion that we wanted to have with you tonight, is kind of the philosophy behind that question. But there's another point. One other note, you'll see that I've asterisked and said roughly $6,000 savings. In reading our bond issuance document that is like this thick, and it's also provided on a CD, should you choose to look at it electronically, we did not read anything that called for any sort of prepayment penalties once that date was hit where you could actually pay down the bonds. However, in talking with our bond counsel today, you do have to contact the bank to make sure, because there's wording in the agreement that says if the interest rate of the bonds that you're paying off is this amount and what we can currently do is this amount, there could be some sort of prepayment penalty fee. And we asked the bank, and I haven't received it yet, but in our reading of it, we're 99% sure that there is no sort of prepayment penalty. However, it is at the discretion of the bank at this point. So I apologize, I was trying to get it for today, but I just haven't been able to get that out of the bank yet. It's been transferred from several folks. The person that we originally had the debt issuance with at the bank responded very promptly and said that Pam is now in charge of that. So we are waiting on Pam at the moment, so I'll keep you posted. But again, that's why we said roughly $6,000, because dependent upon if they're going to charge any additional fees or not from the banking side. And so the policy consideration, again, is should the unrestricted general fund reserves be used to pay down the utility enterprise debt, given that there may be other priorities in the community to fund with those unrestricted general fund reserves. I open it up for questions.
Who'd like to go first? Molly?
Well, I'll just make a simple statement just from looking at these roughly, is that a reduction of the debt load by 1.5% really for a savings of $6,000, and then the loss of the potential utilization or the need for that money seems to me to make it not worthwhile. I do believe in paying down debt. That's my personal philosophy and my own family and my own finances, but this does not seem, to me, it would not be a good use of restricted, reserve funds. I mean, I'd rather see them stay in the reserve. Frankly, I do have some issues with utilization of enterprise debt and paying it off with general fund reserves. I mean, that is an issue for me as well. So I'll just make that statement.
Jennifer, can you remind us before we get too far, the unrestricted reserves we have after the transfers for the 2012 budget, $1.4 million?
I believe it's roughly 1.3.
1.3. Okay.
Taking out the 16% policy and the transfers, yes.
Okay. Dave?
Well, you just raised a good issue for me, thanks. One of the policy considerations I didn't see in here was the possibility of keeping these funds in the reserve for use in emergencies as opposed to making them available for spending. I thank Molly for bringing that to my attention. I definitely would go for that. I share Molly's concern about using general funds for enterprise development. I don't know what the legal ins and outs of that are, but ethically it seems to me to be a touchy area.
It's completely
unrestricted. The
okay
general
to
funds
do.
are unrestricted.
You can't take the utility funds and put them in the general fund, but you can take general funds and put them to utility purposes.
I know we can. I'm not sure we should.
Oh, I thought you were asking about the legality of it.
The
I'm sorry.
legality, I understand. There may be a way to do it.
Other discussion? Michael?
Well, part of the question we have to ask ourselves is, should we change the reserve policy so that reserves aren't just 16%, but are a higher number? And if so, we should probably back it up by some good line of reasoning. But we find ourselves in this unique position where we do have some extra reserves, and that's great. We do also have a tremendous amount of debt. Granted, we can't apply our small reserves for the large debt, and I understand that. My biggest argument in favor of paying off this debt, even though I understand the arguments against it, is yes, we do have the option of paying down a little bit of debt, and that might be a good idea. But what do we do with this money otherwise? We just let it sit there and then just get chipped at and chipped at and chipped at. Whereas, if we have extra money in the budget, where we have extra money that has come in years past, on some level, what that means is, given the services that we have provided in those years, we overtaxed in those years. or had fees that were too high. And if we had fees that were too high in the past, then it would make sense to return that money back to the citizens. It would not make any sense at all, and it's against the Constitution anyway, the state constitution that is, to cut a check for every citizen. And the logic of that is pretty clear. But if we reduce our debt load, that is a method by which we can return those funds in a roundabout way to the citizens, because we don't have that obligation anymore. So that's one of the reasons why I'm in favor of it. And as far as paying down the utility debt, one of the things that we have been raked over the coals, with good reason, I think, at least it feels like it's with good reason for many people, is that we raised the water and sewer rates pretty significantly. Granted, they were probably too low for too long, but did we need to raise them to the level that we did? That's the question, and it hurts a lot of people. If we pay this money down, it takes a tiny, tiny little small dent out of the debt that is part of the cause for why we have raised those water and sewer rates. And if nothing else, it goes in the right direction. But those are the reasons why I would support this overall.
Anytime you start thinking that a household is a good model for a government, you end up making some, frankly, foolish conclusions. In a household, the household is a stable environment until maybe one of the children gets married and then they go out and start their own household. That, in fact, is maybe a better model for a municipality, because we do not have the same people next year as we had last year. It changes with time. There are new people who arrive, there are people who leave, and that very much changes how you think about debt. It also, frankly, changes how you think about tax rates. The reason that we have these reserves is because when times were good and there was lots of sales tax revenue coming in from the lumber and other materials that was used to build houses, we did not spend the money. So that when times were tough, we would not have to raise taxes. If what you do is when the money is coming in on a good time, you lower taxes. Then when times are tough, you're going to have to raise taxes. And that's exactly backwards. You should be able to increase your revenues when times are good and be frugal and not raise your taxes when times are tough. And in order to do that, you need to be, to use the technical term, counter-cyclical. Back to the other thing about a city is not like a household. The utility rate increases were largely due to purchase bonds, which will be used to build new water and sewer facilities. If we spend, if we spend that money, if we wait until we have enough reserves to spend that money, then everybody over the past 20 years paid for it, and the new people over the next 20 years are the ones who will use it. By using bonds, we do some cost shifting so that the new users help to pay for the new facilities. That's one of the reasons that municipal debt makes sense in a way that's completely foreign to when you think about a household. Let me ask Jennifer, if we used these reserves to pay down this debt in, say, the fiscal year 2012, and then in 2013 we needed $350,000, could we take it back from the water utility?
I'm not sure. I would have to look at the legality behind that. I don't know if once the debt is defeased, if that becomes no longer a burden on the system to where it would be an inappropriate use of utility funds. I'm not sure.
That would be my concern, because that's one of the other ways that a municipal accounting is different than a family or even a company. You take even a huge conglomerate like Tyco, and they have a single bottom line. A city does not have a single bottom line. The water utility is a separate enterprise. We cannot, it is illegal to use water utility funds paid in water utility rates for police or for fire or for streets other than the street repair that's directly associated with, for example, a water leak. Similarly, the wastewater or sewer enterprise is a completely separate enterprise. You can't use water funds on sewers. You can't use sewer funds on waters. They're completely separate enterprises. And that's a little bit hard to get your head around. But it's another way in which, if you tend to think of a city's finances in the same way that you would your own checkbook, you will be led astray. So, because of the potential one-way nature of once you use general fund resources within the utility, it's not at all clear that you could get them back. So if you did have an emergency that you needed that money, you'd have to go out and borrow it. And there are costs associated with borrowing it over and above the interest. In a mortgage, there are points and fees. You have similar kinds of things for bonds or for corporate paper, the other kinds of borrowing you do. So I just don't think that this makes sense to use general fund reserves to pay off a water utility debt, especially since at this point almost all of the payment is going to principal and not interest on that debt. It just doesn't make any sense.
David?
I'll be the first to admit that comparing households with municipalities is not always accurate. However, some of the same principles that apply to managing a family income apply to managing cities. Thrift is one of them. Paying down debt is part of thrift. And the countercyclical model isn't the only model that's out there. I forget what you call the model, but there's a model that comes from sometime back in the last century, which has been used for over a century, maybe 2 centuries, and that is if you take it in 20-year increments, the first group of 20 years pays for setting up the system, and they benefit from that. The second group also benefits from that, but they have to pay to set up the system for the next 20-year group. And they're going to pay more because prices go up. Mandates are imposed upon us and that sort of thing. But as a general rule, incomes rise too. So you can't balance these things out exactly. And any of these models probably works. There are advantages and disadvantages to any of them. So I'm not concerned about what model we use so much, but I will say this, Michael, I'm glad you brought this up. And if we were a little flusher at the moment, I would support this in a minute. I'm just concerned about the reserves, and I think you already know that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, there's one huge difference, and I agree actually with Councilmember Greenlee about the comparison of household models versus governments. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this discussion, is because of exactly that. If a household has some extra funds in the bank, great. We think this is great. This is profit. This is good. This is holding on to some of your hard-earned money. A government's completely different. This money was not given to us through our industry, our desire to work harder, our working extra shifts. This money was given to us because we mandated that the people who moved here give us this tax money, or when they build a house, they give us these fees. That's how this money got into our coffers, and that's one huge difference between that and a household model. In a household, you don't get that same revenue stream coming in, and you don't have that claim on other people's money. That's the reason why I think it's necessary for us to pay off our debt with the excess money. Or, at the same time, the flip side of this is, if we need to change our reserves to bump it up from 16% to something that's legitimate that we can defend, let's do that. If we really truly do need to have reserves that are larger, let's make it city council policy, increase those reserves to whatever number we need. If we need to capture all $1.3 million, let's capture all that $1.3 million, put it in reserves, make it untouchable outside of very defined emergencies. My point is, any money that's beyond what we need to budget for, and the budget's hard, I mean, we saw how budget discussions go back and forth. And during the budget discussions, we have to defend every line item practically, and every department head has to define what money they need, and they've done a very good job of coming in on budget. So if we don't need to spend more money for meeting our budget, and if we don't have a policy that says this extra money is reserved for these specific types of contingencies, my problem is that this money is very easily spent, or potentially very easily spent, for any number of things which might not be a wise idea. That was the reason why I don't look at this excess money in the reserves as just a pot for us to pull from and say, well, it'd be kind of a cool thing to have this. And yeah, we could somehow say that that's not budgeted yet, but it's kind of necessary and it's kind of a good idea. If we need to have reserves, let's set the reserves, and any money beyond that should be paying down debt so that we don't have to have that extra load. But anyway, there you go. We've heard the rest of the arguments there.
Right. Councilman Delavar, the only question I have is along with the theory that he has, where this group of citizens pays for it for 20 years and has paid for it, I should say, for 20, and they got the incoming people that move here pay for the next 20 years. How do you take that away from those people that would that should be paying for their fair share? If they move in last year, they haven't been paying for 20 years on it, and they should pay their share for the next 20 years. And that's my curiosity. If we pay it off, then they don't.
Right. I understand the philosophy, and I think it's more than just one aspect of that discussion that we probably should look at if we're really going to seriously look at that. One is debt load. Take, for instance, if you take out a new loan and say, I'm going to defer all the payments on this thing to the future, that is making a certain decision about the necessity to have that money right now for the project right now. And we saw that like with the recent bond that we had, which I believe was, what, $26.1 million, if I remember correctly, something along those lines.
16 million?
Was it 16? No, it was 26 million for the total payments if you include the interest.
Oh.
But that's it. I mean, that's $10 million worth of interest payments included with the $16 million of principal that we get. So we're asking our citizens now and in the future to pay $10 million on interest alone, whereas if we had a different policy, which might be very difficult for governments to do, of building up the money first, then that's $10 million less total obligation in the future. So that's one part of the discussion. The other part of the discussion is very valid that you bring up about we pay down this debt now and build up money in the present. As soon as we buy this, whatever it is that we're going to buy, new streets, sidewalks, whatever, out of money that's not laden with debt, we have deferred a lot of things to get to that point. And if we do that, we've spent all that deferral, that time without the goodies, if you will. And somebody who comes into the city at that point gets all the benefits without paying for that service. And I completely understand that. However, what was it? I think they said 2/3 of population growth results from our children. So if you're talking about the future people of the city, 2/3 of those people are our own offspring. So we're talking about 1/3 of the future population growth. I don't think we need to stick it to them necessarily, because if we follow this policy, we'll have a better financial picture overall. That's my main argument, and the secondary argument is that it would cost us less money, and less money spent to bankers. But having said that, that would also require quite if we were going to go full bore with that policy, it would require quite a big shift in our debt policy load for the council and future councils as well.
I want to make sure that I'm on the same track with you, because I have some other thoughts about this, but one of the things I'm concerned about is that when we made the water and sewer rates climb, we were looking out 20 years. And if that number changes next year or 5 years from now, I would rather see the policy built in that $6,000 we identified here be used as a one-time expense for something that's needed in the city, not paying off that debt so that all of those people that are here for the next 20 get to pay their share of that water or sewer or whatever. But I'm not necessarily saying it should be put away and just left or nitpicked at, but maybe we need to take that $6,000 and identify some project or something in town that needs to be done, and we use it as a one-time expenditure rather than hiring somebody, because at least then the citizens could see it. We have no way of knowing now in 5 years what kind of monies will be reserved and put away in there. But rather than giving it back or trying to figure out today for 5 years out or 20 years out what rate we should apply to that structure, I'd rather see the ordinance, if we ever get to that it says we use it for a one-time expenditure somewhere.
Other discussion?
I just wanted to add a couple of things. That one of the things that kind of skated by that probably most people who aren't behind this desk didn't really make much of a ripple is there's a PSA, professional services agreement, with a consulting firm to do a conceptual design for 27th Street and SR 14. There's a $55 million project underway right now on SR 14. The way that project starts is with a conceptual design more than 20 years ago. Our immediate problem from the city point of view is if you try to look forward into the future of the city, especially where it's going to grow in terms of employment, the northeast corner of the city is where it has to be. As part of that, it's been a long, probably at least a decade, maybe 2 decades, part of the city's plan that the next railroad crossing, the next overhead crossing over the railroad, will be at 27th Street and go diagonally across to 32nd. The problem is that if you go across at 32nd, you have to be 25 feet over the rail, but then you don't have enough time to get down to ground level before you get to Evergreen. So you can't go right straight across. You have to go kitty corner. There's an existing overpass at 27th on SR 14, so it makes an ideal place to put what's called a diamond interchange, or at least half of a split diamond interchange. So you put that there, and then you come across at 27th, and then you go up 32nd. But you need major improvements on 32nd and on Stiles Road, and then beyond that to get there. This is all part of the capital facilities plan that came before council a month ago, maybe it was 2. That's the kind of planning horizon that's involved for the city. And one little bitty piece of that is what you have to do at the intersection of 32nd and Evergreen. One of the other things that kind of floated by for most people is that we have a contract to do improvements there. What actually happened is the state of Washington came to us and said, we want you to apply for a grant for that. And we said, well, it's a competitive grant. We won't score high enough. And they said, you're the only ones who have the money for the match. Because we still had that money, call it reserve, call it an ending balance, whatever you wish, for every 25 cents that we put into the project, more or less 25 cents, maybe it's 28, we get 75 cents from the state. That's a huge payback in comparison to saving $6,000 in interest over 3 years. Those are the kinds of things that you can do with reserves in your general fund, is that you can put those pieces together, because when the economy's going great guns and everybody's got lots of money, then everything is very competitive. It's very hard to do anything. We can be smart just like McDonald's is smart. What McDonald's is doing today is building market share, so that when the economy goes back up again, they ride a bigger elevator up. That's quite different than what we're doing, but still, by having this money and keeping it in the general fund to take advantage of these kinds of opportunities, we can create a much better future for Washougal. And just as another quick aside, Washougal grew from 4,500 in 1980 to 14,500 in 2010. I think that's more than our children.
Other discussion? Jen, I had a couple quick questions on the debt spreadsheet that you've got. The fourth item down, the water sewer revenue bond, is not showing an interest rate. Is that because it pays off this year and the interest is completely paid?
Correct.
Okay.
So it wasn't, it's already been paid in full, so
So that one's gone?
yes.
Gotcha. Well, there's one off the list.
Yeah.
And then 2 down from that, the reservoir contract. What is that? It doesn't appear to be a bond. It doesn't appear to be an LID. Is it a loan contract that we have on one of the reservoirs, or for the property for the reservoir?
Confirm. Is that what I believe it's the Lear Tower.
The stand-up?
But it's not showing a interest rate on that one.
I couldn't find it. The documents behind it.
Gotcha. So it likely has an interest rate.
I think that is, I need to do some more research on
Okay.
that one.
Okay.
But I think it has an expiration date to where, I believe it's sort of like a latecomers agreement, to where it has a expiration date to where if it's not used, then it goes away.
Okay.
But that wasn't the dollar amount I was expecting for that, so I could be completely mistaken. But I will get more information on that one. I'll continue digging.
So right now, there's only really 2 bonds that could be paid off.
Paid down.
Paid down or paid off. The first one and the sixth one, that reservoir contract, if it can be. All the other ones either have been, or we're not into a prepayment time for them yet, or they are so 0.5% interest rate through the Public Works Trust funds that would make no sense to pay those off. Okay.
May I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
Jennifer, in the past, we've taken money from the perpetual care fund at the cemetery, and then we have to pay it back with an interest rate on top of that. Do we still have that, is that still an ability we have to do? We could still do something like that?
Yes, you can do interfund loans.
The reason that I ask is, let's say we take that $6,000. We create a fund that when we have over the 16% or whatever that number is, if we were to put that money away into a fund, we may go back into that fund and dig some money out of it for something, an investigation or something like that, that we didn't plan for. But if we took the money out of it to use for any number of things, would we pay it back at an interest rate as an interfund loan? Could we set up something like that?
If it's a general fund that we're giving money to other funds, you wouldn't necessarily have to.
Oh,
The general fund can pay for anything. The reason why you have to charge interest on those restricted funds is because they are restricted to a certain purpose. So therefore, it would be a gift of public funds if you didn't charge interest because they're not general funds. There's also a time limit on that. In the past, you could go up to around 10 years. The state auditors have been frowning on that recently, and they're supposed to be temporary in nature, which is more like a 3 to 5 year window. And they are leaning more toward the 3-year.
Well, what made me think about that was Councilman Greenlee's statement about the 27th Street overpass. And, someday that's all going to come to fruition. And if we were putting money away towards that for the matching funds or otherwise, is that potentially a line item we could create?
We could. We have the transportation match fund.
You just did?
Which we just did in the 2011 budget amendment, and then the 2012 budget, we actually have appropriations operationally going into that fund. So
Okay.
we do have the mechanism already in place to do that. We could just increase those transfers if that's where you would like the money to go.
And see, that's my idea of a one-time expenditure. Take that 6,000 and put it there, and then for a lack of. So.
Any other discussion on debt? Okay, I'm sure to be revisited.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
based on the discussion, I'm not anticipating that we're going to bring an action item next week.
I'm not hearing anything close to consensus, so.
Okay.
Okay, on the agenda, we're back to public comments. Any members of the public wish to address council this evening? Yes, ma'am.
Hooray.
Vanguard 4813 K Street. I just kind of want to, on this one item, the debt that we're talking about, and I understand municipalities and homeowners have a different setup. But having gone through what we've gone through is you never know what's going to happen. You absolutely have no clue. And because I was a banker and I didn't believe in debt, I didn't believe in everything and paid everything off, when I got sick and ended up in the ICU, surgery, cancer, you name it, we also lost our house because instead of having that reserve, we did not have the money to keep going forward because I paid my medical bills. Just as if, like the police and the fire, the emergency we just had this last week, think about the overtime, the time that's been put in. And if Washougal continues to grow and we continue to have issues that take effect, that cause more overtime, needing more police, needing more safety features, my comment to you is those are issues also that the city needs to look at when it comes to utilizing money that's gonna save you $6,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to address council? Okay, I've got a couple, 3 items under my report. The first one is just a question to council in regards to the workshop of December 27th. We have virtually nothing coming forward that we would workshop that evening, getting ready for the first meeting in January. Do you care to meet for a few minutes just to have me adjourn?
No.
I don't care one way or another.
I think I hear a consensus on that one.
So to make that official, council, if it's your pleasure, we would need a motion and a second and a vote to suspend your rules, because that's where you prescribe the meeting, and then having suspended your rules to not meet in a regularly scheduled work session on that date.
So let's go ahead and put that on the agenda for Monday.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Second item I have is in regards to the lighted Christmas parade and tree lighting that we had downtown on Friday. For those that weren't there, I know a number of council members were there and a lot of our staff as well. Thank you for helping. It was tremendous. I was pleasantly shocked and thrilled at the number of people that we had down there in that plaza. So, and I know if you tried to get into the hearth later, if you tried to get past all of our kids and grandkids and papas to try and get ice cream later, if you tried to get into the restaurants were full. People were still milling about. The Festival of Trees did very, very well this year. They made substantially more dollars, it appears, than they made last year. So, all in all, I would say that that brief few hours on Friday was very productive in the city. Thank you for everybody that took part in that. And then the last item I have is I want to take a quick minute to recognize both of our chiefs, fire and police both. Last week, as everyone knows, we had a major event in the city. I know I had breakfast on Thursday morning with one of the heads of our law enforcement in the county, who said that in 42 years he has never seen a response that large in his professional career. I believe that all of our law enforcement personnel, all of the fire personnel, and certainly many other members of our staff throughout the city that pitched in and helped. From everything I saw, everything was being done extremely professionally. Everything was being done with the best interests of the community and our children kept in mind in how they went about that. We had some very anxious, I'd love to say moments, but there were some anxious hours before we truly understood what was happening and what had transpired. I think Chief has some updates from earlier today and some additional information that was released. I think one of the things that, and not to bring it back to dollars and cents, but one of the things that underscores budgetary items that sometimes we look at and say, is it really worth us paying that $15,000 a year SWAT insurance to the county sheriff's office? I'd say that was probably one of the longest call-outs that they've had for quite a while as far as mobilization, the time that all of those officers were there. Annie mentioned briefly overtime costs and whatnot. We'll certainly have some out of this. Thankfully, though, because of the SWAT program that we take part in and pay for on an annual basis, because of us belonging to the Regional Major Crimes Unit, there are a lot of those costs out there that we would think of as normal overtime that we would have taken or reimbursed somebody for that we won't necessarily see. On top of that, hopefully Jennifer will have some time in the next couple of weeks as all those payroll reports comes through. Both departments have been very judicious in their use of overtime and their staffing throughout this year, and we're hoping that we may actually be able to absorb quite a bit of the overtime that was there without a budget amendment, which a homicide alone, you can strip through that in a heartbeat. For that size of a operation and that number of personnel that were out there, it speaks kudos to these two gentlemen and how they manage their departments and bringing us through that. So With that, excellent job. Either, Chief, either one of you want to say anything in regards to Wednesday?
I was just overwhelmed by the response of the various agencies. We had Portland Police, ATF, Vancouver, Camas, Clark County, and everybody just worked together very well. You'd think that we'd actually had done this before. And things went very smoothly. And also to our own departments. I know I made several calls in for assistance from Public Works, and everybody just dropped what they were doing, pulled together, and just made it happen. Friday, we were in a situation where, the course of the investigation, we were deciding what do we do with the property, and because we were unsure on how many bodies were actually identified, or how many bodies we actually had, we had to sit on that crime scene, and we had been sitting on it since the day of the event. But to have to bring out 400 feet of fencing Friday afternoon, Public Works just went out and did that for us, and it helped us to cut back on the number of people that we had to sit on the site, which everybody was getting pretty tired, so that was very helpful. But and then today, as you know, there was another press release that we sent out. I believe it was Dr. Wickham out of the ME's office that sought the assistance from a forensic anthropologist out of King County, who looked at the remains and was able to confirm for us, yes, we do have 3 individuals there, which allowed us today to just secure the area. There still will be an ongoing investigation, and we're not done, but it allowed us to conclude having to watch that site. So just hats off to everybody in the city. It was just obviously a very stressful time for everybody. Officer McPherson is doing well, and I just want to thank everybody in the city, because it made a stressful situation that much easier.
Yeah, I just want to say that one of our models in the fire service is everyone goes home, and we were very fortunate at this time that everybody did go home. A lot of events were taking place. The first in engine was in the city Camas at a meeting at a captain's meeting. And if they were in the station house, who knows, they may have been the first ones on the scene. So fortunate that everyone went home. Some of the things that arise out of that, the special agent for the ATF, he said, and kudos to our paid volunteer staff, he says that was one of the best things that in processing, they were able to process the fire scene, and they were able to identify the bodies because of the handling that the fire department did in extinguishing the flame. It was very tedious. It took us about 4 hours to finally put the fire out, but we had to do that in order to preserve the evidence, and that's how they were able to process that and find the 3 bodies. I mean, we could have gone in there and blasted it with our hose gun, but we knew that was going to disrupt the scene. So we went in there, and it took over 4 hours just to make sure that the fire was out.
I did get I sent a thank you over to Pat Schaefer at Riverview for, basically, sorry, we took over your branch for most of a day and put you out of business, but, it was amazing, the responding crews took over, the Washougal branch of Riverview as their command post, and I tell you what, these folks in there, of course, I guess they could have locked up and gone home, but they didn't. They kept the coffee going. They opened up all of their desks. They gave the officers and the firefighters access to the computer systems to be able to get outbound. They had real phones. They had conference rooms. They had restrooms. They had a fire going. And I sent Mr. Schaefer a thank you for that, and he sent me back a response this morning. He says, we don't warrant any thanks. He says, your two departments out there in what they did, they're the ones that need the thanks of all of us for keeping everybody safe. So I'll make sure and forward that one on to you as well. Chief, what's the disposition of Dan's patrol car?
There's being processed. In fact, they're going to continue the processing that tomorrow. His vehicle was struck at least 4 times. And we believe that there's some evidence inside the vehicle and that one of the rounds did not go exit the vehicle. So I'll have more information on that tomorrow.
If at some point it's possible and the windows don't shatter from being moved around and that type of stuff, it would be a sobering experience for anybody in this room to see what that officer went through. And I've said it before, it doesn't matter whether it's firefighters that are running into burning buildings and buildings that are falling down, or an officer that's just rolling up on what he still believes is just a structure fire. When you look at the holes in the front windows of that vehicle, I still do not know how that young man is alive this morning. I mean, it's absolutely sobering. And you've got to go from both sides and line those holes up where they are in those windows in order to understand it. And you got to see Dan and how large he is to begin with. It's a lot of window, but Dan's a lot of Dan. So there's just not a lot of room to be able to move and not to have escaped that the way that he did.
I think he's escaped death by maybe 8 inches.
Tremendous job by everybody. Thank you. That's all that I have. David?
Thank you, Mayor. I thought I would share a card that we received. It was addressed to the council from Mr. Claude Rohrbaugh, who lives on F Place. And on his envelope, he said, for the council regarding the F Place incident, thanks, good job. So I'll just read it because I think it would speak for itself. It says, kudos to the fire and police for protecting our neighborhood. Thanks, you guys and girls of the city are great. He goes on to say, I've often been critical of our city, but when the need is there, there's no criticism. Best wishes to the elected and appointed officials for a better 2012, Claude. So we thank Mr. Rohrbaugh is one of the neighbors that lives over there. And I think just on a personal note, and for all of us, I think we also remember the tragedy that this represents for a family in our community, and our prayers are with that family.
Any items from council?
A couple different things that I also was up there with the chief on that, and one of the things is that when Larry Osentowski became sick in the last year, they put him on light duty, and he took a class for fire marshal to relieve some of the load for the fire chief. He did such a fantastic job up there working with the ATF that they moved him to the front lines, digging and searching, and potentially he's going to be a new member of the ATF team because he brings to that team his firefighting experience. There were several instances. One of them was an extinguisher, a water extinguisher had exploded, and they wanted to take that in for some analysis to see if there were any accelerants in it in increasing the fire. And Larry says, well, you don't need to take that one. He says, that one's still got the pin in it. And the guy goes, oh, I never even thought about that. So there's things like that our firefighters did up there that the experts didn't even have those answers for. So I think it's kind of neat that Larry gets a chance now potentially to go work in other crime scenes and help out and bring his expertise to it. And I think that has a lot to do with the chief mentoring him as a fire marshal and taking the classes that he took. One other thing I was really pleased tonight to see, away from the incident, was that when we needed institutional knowledge here tonight, Rose, in her position, leaned over and gave David and Jennifer and Mitch some information, and that's why it's great that we hired her from within the ranks. Somebody new from outside would never have had that knowledge base that she's got, and so for that reason, I'm really pleased that we hired Rose to put her into the position as the assistant to the administrator and the mayor, because she will contribute greatly to this organization, as she already has, but she's got institutional knowledge that a lot of people don't have, and she knows why things happened the way they did. So it's really a plus that she can help us that way. And I just want to say over again, back to that call up there, that not a single shot fired by any other agency other than just the individual, but how we ended up not going to a mass casualty, we just avoided it. It's unbelievable, because he had these guns set up so that in a situation he should have got neighbors. 2 paramedics were standing right in front. The police officers were there. It was amazing. So we really avoided. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, one time we had a homicide in Washougal, and I asked Chief Garwood at the time, why don't we put money away into an account in case we have this investigation? In this case, ATF stepped up, didn't cost anything. It was primarily a training exercise, I guess, of what you would look at it as. The Clark County Sheriff is out here, the Vancouver Police. Those could have been all our expenses.
Some of them still will be.
There will be bills sent, Chief?
I'm sure there'll be some. We'll have to look at what exactly our MOU with major crimes covers, but I know it covers 3 days worth of investigations, just what's going to fall outside that, don't know yet. And then, of course, our own overtime.
Yeah, and we certainly have some of the, we leaned on Camas Police Department to utilize some folks for the evening hours and that type of stuff as well, in order to stretch ourselves and still be able to do what we need to do. And while some of that, while that thing's unfolding, comes under mutual aid, probably Friday night, Saturday night, probably we're going to have a tough time saying that we had a mutual aid emergency and really needed to utilize that. So we may have some costs back to some of the neighboring departments.
Well, as the chief said, we had 10 other calls that day besides, and probably the biggest event, fire and police related, we've ever had in the city of Washougal, and we had that many. So all of the rigs were out, and I went out and got the last out vehicle that we used for the parade and got it ready to go in case we had another call. I mean, we were literally stretched out as thin. We made multiple calls to dispatch to have manpower call everybody in. We were stretched out just as thin as we can imagine, and so it's pretty impressive the way everybody did everything, and it was fun to be a part of the organization and proud to do it. So the last thing I want to tell you guys is that I stopped in at Papa's the other day, and if you ever want to try something different for ice cream, he put in vanilla bean ice cream and raspberry vinaigrette. Believe it, you got to go try it. It's good.
But you have to have at least 2 bites of it.
Yeah, because the first one is, ooh, and the second one, it goes over great.
Any other items from council?
I just wanted to, I feel very inarticulate at this point, but I'm absolutely amazed and proud of the professionalism and the abilities of our departments, police, fire, public works, finance, administration, everyone who was involved. But also, I think, having been through a couple of emergency trainings, I'm sure that the after-action reports will have some things in them that could have gotten better. But at least from where I sit, it was absolutely amazing. Everything worked as well as anyone could have hoped. Certainly better than it ever does in a training scenario. So my congratulations and flat-out amazement, and I hope that the 2 chiefs will pass that along to their staff and to the other people who were involved. Thank you.
Just one more comment. I had a chance to talk to the school district, and they had all their schools were on lockdown, And it was, I didn't know how they had it set up, but this was a yellow, code yellow, which meant that they could move within the school building. They couldn't go outside. Code red would have put them on the floor, curtains closed, lights turned off, kind of thing. And so they are going to review their policies and make sure how everything happened, because they had kids on buses at that time of day. They ran them to the school bus barns and entertained them there till the parents came and got them. I know Chief and I have talked about reviewing our policies just to make sure that how we respond to get in. Sometimes I'm ahead of the engine, depending on where it's at. And the same thing, I'm sure, with your agency. And we talked with the ambulance crews the other night. And Camas is going to go back and review their process and their policies and just tweak them a little bit, because sometimes you're just in the middle of it and you don't get that option. But if we can go back and review them and make them just a little bit safer, I think we'll be a lot better off. So, but the school district will do the same thing.
There is, and I'll make sure that we bring it forward to a workshop, most likely in the first quarter. Out of this, it caused me a little bit of pause to look at a couple of items that we've got in our city code that have never really made sense to me, very little sense. One of them that makes no sense and is actually in contradiction to state code. Our codes for police and fire exercises actually allows for the mayor to take over an active scene. Actually, it allows for any city council member to take over an active scene and countermand the chiefs and whoever the chain of command is. That is likely one piece that you'll see coming back to have written out of code, because there isn't anybody other than those individuals and where they were headed during that time that we want doing anything even close to that. So, like I said, one of them's just in contradiction itself to code, but both of those, I think we should probably go ahead and make the effort to get those written back out of there.
One other thing, they did say that there were a lot of businesses were impacted by this thing, and apparently once they shut Safeway down, all of their employees loaded up and went to Camas because they were buried in Camas with people going to the store. Yep. And so those people didn't lose anything. We were able to go down to Subway that night and pick up a bunch of sandwiches, and they'd been shut down, and they were just tickled to death to have 100. But I saw people going into Kneaders. I saw the news staffs going in and out of restaurants. So really, those people got hit by it, but they also got a little help too. And I was pleased to see that everybody was able to help those businesses out. So it affected an awful lot of people.
I'm sure we bought a little bit of food and coffee around town. Mm-hmm. Any other items? Jennifer?
Yeah, I'd also like to make some comments about Wednesday. I was, unfortunately, one of those parents that had their child bused to the bus barn. Shannon was on the bus, and she got stuck, and I guess they locked it down before the children reached the school, and so they had to turn all the buses around and go back to the bus barn. And there were about an hour and a half of very tense moments, everyone trying to figure out, where their children were and that sort of thing. The robocalls from the district started coming out about 5 after 10 to let the parents know, where their children were and everything. And I really do think they did a fantastic job from then on of just sending something out within pretty much every hour. A robocall went out to every parent parent of a child that was affected, particularly the elementary school children. There were a lot of upset parents, I know, but I was never worried. I knew that my child was being well taken care of wherever she was before I found out where she was. And, I knew that the district was doing their best, and I wanted to say something to that effect. And I will, at the school board meeting tomorrow night, also mention that I was very impressed with the way the different agencies work together to get the word out. And, the lockdown went out almost immediately, after the emergency call went out. I am assuming I wasn't privy to all of that. But I want to say thank you in particular to Charlie Dawson. I know that she donated a lot of time to, particularly to the children at the bus barn. So I don't know how she does it, but she's amazing, and I really wanted to relay that to her somehow, that I really appreciate everything that she did for the kids out there.
Heard she was leading songs.
She was. She did a fantastic job with all those kids. It was an unusual situation. I'm not sure that they were entirely prepared for that. But they made the best of the situation, and the students were fine. They were actually exactly, yay bus drivers. But yeah, they were having a blast because they got a day off of school. And and this was... Some did, exactly. The others were actually not happy because they had to stay an extra day because it was early release. So the kids that were stuck on the bus actually did get to come home at 12:30. We finally did get the phone call starting to come through with the parents to come pick up your children about 12:30 or so. But I guess the other children that got stuck at school were stuck a lot longer than that.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wanted to pass that along.
Great, thank you. Okay, if there are no other items, we're adjourned.